Well, welcome back to KetchOn Strategy, and my guest with me is Adam Specht, who has over 20 years of expertise in training and learning and development. And I've been talking to him in the previous 3 episodes about how to establish training as a strategy, why that should be important, and what happens when there is no strategy for training. But one of the things that tends to happen with strategy is finding someone or somewhere to actually champion training and get it into the C-suite, get it viewed as something valuable that's going to make a difference to an organisation. And so that's really the topic I'm having with Adam today. How do we set up training as a strategy? So let's segue on that question straight to you, Adam. How do we set up training as a strategy?
Well, step one's pretty straightforward. Review your existing strategy in the first place, or the tracks taking you in the direction that you want to go, so you actually get those desired outcomes you're looking for. And maybe training and development is a called out line item part of that strategy, like some of the partnerships you've referenced in previous episodes. Maybe it's not, but it all starts with, do you have a clear strategy, and are you headed in a good direction in the first place?
Right, because clearly there'd be no point adding training if in fact you're heading in the wrong direction. And I think that came out in our previous episode too, that if you're not really knowing where you're going, training people up isn't going to help at all.
Yeah, right. I think many of us have experiences with organizations whose overarching strategy was a clunker, and at that point, then training isn't a magic wand that's going to unravel that.
Okay, so that's a nice pushback for me, because my job currently, apart from when I'm painting, is strategic management, and is very much about how to help businesses align their business strategy. But let's say they do have their strategy is all good. They know exactly what outcomes they're going to. They've got a very clear vision. The strategy is going to enable them to execute against that vision. What's the next step?
Really, then it's to have learning aligned with that strategy. To have the learning deeply, organically embedded with that strategy to help push it forwards. And it really infuses itself throughout the culture of the organization, from the leadership ranks all the way down to the newest, most junior employee.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned organically embedded, because that reminds me of how I often view strategy as the roots for a tree. You know, the outcome of the tree, particularly if it's in an orchard, is to bear some fruit. You know, that's the outcome. But to keep the tree growing and stabilized, it needs a good root system. And I know sometimes, you know, when we talk about culture, we talk about getting it into the DNA, which actually makes you wonder, you know, if there's a missing gene in a company's DNA. Often it's to do with people, you know, caring for people. And that's why it behaves kind of a little erratically and doesn't achieve the outcomes it wanted. So how do you know that a company is getting their DNA sorted, that it is part of their culture, that it is deeply organic within the organization?
The first thing I typically look for is who owns the learning in the organization. Is it a chief learning officer? Is it part of the C-suite? Does the board infuse this or have this idea of a learning culture? But at the end of the day, you need to have that point person that's job is to align strategy with execution, that owns the learning. That's the very first thing we should look for.
Well, that makes sense. In fact, the C-suite's been getting bigger in recent years as companies, they've got more things to juggle. So we've got the CXO in charge of experience, I always like how they didn't want to have CEO or two CEOs. We'll just make it X. So we got the CXO. There's the CDO, Chief Data Officer, because data has become critical to how well an organisation can execute. So a CLO, for those who don't know, and I'm assuming that many who are watching this video are trying to go, well, how do I level up my training, my learning and development? A Chief Learning Officer is a key component. So tell me more about this, Adam, so that I don't get derailed, but we stay on track with getting this on board.
You know, it's so easy for learning to get lost in an organization. And my experience has been that every time learning is buried 15 layers down the org chart, a team within a team within a team, or if it's dispersed across multiple teams in the organization, learning very quickly becomes a compliance level issue, a tick the box, a jumbled mess, or a lot of duplicated effort, none of which is going to really impact those metrics that matter, like net promoter score, profitability, retention, etc. So it gets us back to this idea of who owns the learning, and the higher up in the organization, the better. My position would be it really demands a C-suite advocate. You think about preparing strategy sessions. Is the learning team even involved in any of that? Or are they just sort of kept and they kind of find out what the new strategy plan is along with everybody else? So if you have somebody in the C-suite who owns learning, they're going to be in the room anyway, or get the right learning team people in the room. So it all starts with who owns that learning in the org.
Right. Well, that's good, because I've seen that happen, and it was one of those experiences that made me want to reach out to you and talk about elevating training. So I've got a client. They're a small medium enterprise. They're a non-profit organisation. So in the executive team, they've got a CEO, and you know that's they're not big enough to have a CFO, but they do have someone who does finance. And I'm actually in a couple of weeks facilitating their strategy day, and while they've brought in the board of directors, they haven't brought in their finance person. The person they're bringing in from the business, apart from the operations lead, is their trainer, because training, learning and development is their unique selling point. It's what distinguishes them from their competitors, their high level of expertise. So they want to bring that trainer into setting their strategy for the next 3 to 5 years. So it's exactly to your point, and that's what I know is going to help them remain successful. So we've sort of done step one, which was get some ownership and give that ownership some authority so they're not lost in the weeds. Well, that was step one. What about step two? Surely there's another step involved.
For sure. Another signpost to look for that the learning culture is strong is learning called out and rewarded rather as part of a performance review or as part of a compensation review discussion. Is learning specifically is it buried as one line item out of 100 things that are measured, or is it called out specifically? Has the individual completed the assigned learnings? If they're up for promotion, are we going back and looking to see that people completed whatever their ongoing development courses were? Is it you get what you reward? So I always look at performance development and compensation plans to see if learning is somehow included, called out, and rewarded in that process.
Okay, so just so that we clear away any misconceptions, because if someone was to hear that for the first time, they might go, "Oh, okay, so isn't that a compliance thing? I just had to complete my courses, and then I should expect to be rewarded for that?"
Fair question for sure, but good training has evaluations and assessments built into it. So without getting into the mechanics of all that, that would be a different series. The training itself should be evaluating, does this participant not only know the information, but have the ability to apply it, not just watch a bunch of videos, fast forward to the end, click yes, and boom, you've been certified. So the learning itself really should measure that learning has occurred and that there's going to be an impact in the future. So it doesn't become that tick the box episode. And if somebody would like to get into how do you set all that up, I'd be happy to support them in a different chat.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a nice segue, in fact. So if someone did want to contact you about the mechanics of training, where could they get in touch with you?
NoBoringTraining.com. That's the home base for CAS Concepts, the home of No Boring Training.
Right. Well, you heard it here, and the link will be in the video as well, in the description. So, step 2, we're starting to see some metrics come through to show that there's evidence that the training, learning and development is actually working. And really, any strategy, you've got to be measuring. You've got to be looking at it to go, I wanted my people to go from here to there. How is that working? And you've got an owner who's probably also designated other people to be checking on that, but they would be measuring along that strategy. What else is there to ensure that we can elevate learning and development from down in the weeds to up higher?
This kind of ties back into the comment you made just a few minutes ago. Is learning and development included in strategic planning sessions? Do they have that seat at the table? Or do they, as we said before, kind of find out with everyone else? And that could be not only the big picture strategic initiatives, it could be simple things like product rollouts, new sales campaigns, new initiatives inside the firms. Is it just sort of a matter of fact course of doing business that, we've got a new product coming out, we get the marketing team, we get the product team, we get the sales team, and here's the training team that can help tie together so that people can go out and execute on that product launch. So that's another great area to assess the strength of a learning culture inside the organization. As soon as you see that that's just a natural way of doing things, you know that learning is being leveraged appropriately.
Okay, so ownership and results-focused evidence. That's what we've been discussing. And really, isn't that how business should work anyway? You say, great, in order for us to win, we're going to move over to here. And then once you get to there, you go, well, did that help us get closer to executing against our vision? Or did we find once we got to there, that was not the right place? We've now learnt that wasn't the right thing to do. So we're going to have a new strategy and maybe we're going to get over to there. But having an owner, having the people understand that it's important, I think is critical. Part of the strategy, really, the people have to own that. They've got to buy into it and say, yes, I can see value in us doing that. Otherwise, they'll be half-hearted. I think maybe in our next episode, Adam, we should talk about the fact that we are living in difficult times. And I'm seeing cuts across the board, certainly in my country, right at this moment. There's quite a cut going through government departments. What can we trim out? Trim the fat, get rid of the waste, and people are really quite hurt. Yeah. People are quite hurt by that because they don't want to be viewed as waste. They feel like they were doing a good job. But sort of roles that were a little bit more people-focused are disappearing. And those sort of soft roles, and maybe training could be one of those. Companies or people who are thinking about training, who are watching this video, could be going, well, training's great when it's good, when the times are good, but what happens when times are tough, and we're trying to retreat and save things? So maybe that's the topic for next time. Is training always a good strategy? And in the meantime, you've mentioned no boring training. Where else can people find you, Adam?
Well, and before we get to that, can I squeeze in one more sign of a good learning culture that I'd hate to end the episode without at least mentioning this? Because we talked about ownership of learning. We talked about rewarding it through performance management, performance reviews. We've talked about inculcating it into day-to-day operations. But we left out an important group, which is the field level management team. And I think we'd be remiss if we ended the episode without hitting on that topic. And when it comes to learning culture, if you have buy-in from the top and buy-in from the frontline workers, but your mid-level managers aren't aligned with that strategy and they don't buy into it, when the times get tough, like you're leading towards, or when things are busy, when there's a choice to be made between doing activity or taking somebody offline to do some training, a manager's they're in that sort of no-win situation. And you need the support of your frontline managers to ensure that learning is really supported throughout the organization. So I'd hate to end this episode without mentioning a great sign of leadership culture, or learning culture rather, inside an organization is, do your frontline managers support it? Are they rewarded for it? Do they have KPIs that reward the use of learning tools inside the organization, so that when they feel that pressure to focus on outputs, they don't forget the inputs? So just wanted to make that point before we wrap things up.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an overlooked point, and why it is essential to, clearly I overlooked it in the script, but in life I've experienced that in organizations I've led, that once I think of one project. It was a transformation project. I'm going to tell the story because we've got time. And for viewers, I recommend this story. So, transformation project. It was a project here in New Zealand of national significance. And what they were doing was they were converting all the old survey maps of properties, which had previously been done with pen and ruler on paper, and these big survey maps. So off your property, so you know what your boundaries were, you knew where to put your gates and what you owned off your land. And they wanted to digitize these and move them into a database where, instead of drawing out maps by hand or plans, they only needed to enter the coordinates, and then the database would create print it out for you. And that would save an enormous amount of space in filing cabinets and offices around the country. Anyway, a whole lot of smart surveyors were hired for the project, and a government department who specialised in mapping was given this task to do. And after 2 years, it was clear they could not do it. And so the government actually liquidated their own government department because they were having to pay penalty fees for not achieving back to another government department. Now, the company I was with at the time was Electronic Data Systems, fantastic American company, which sadly no longer exists. And EDS out of Plano, Texas, and Ross Perot, for those who remember. Anyway, it now meant that we had subcontracted that to this government department that had failed. Now we were going to pick it up, and we were going to be liable for those penalties. So I got asked to go in and transform it. And what I noticed was that the quality was terrible. And people just didn't know how to do the job to completion. So they would actually all need retraining. And so training was part of my strategy. I had to mix up everyone so that they could communicate really quickly with each other. So it was a change of workflow and a change of, as the work went through, your piece of work went right next to the person you were sitting with, who was going to do the next chunk and check that you'd got it all right. And they could immediately start saying, this is what you're getting wrong. We need to fix this so we'll get it right next time. But part of in order to speed it up, was we created a video library of the common problems that were coming up in the maps. So people, you started seeing them. They would be watching the video on their desk, just a 2-3 minute video. This is how you do this bit of work. And once they were able to now know and have a reference point, these are the common things, suddenly the place started humming. And we finished that project 2 years ahead of schedule.
Oh.
The client became one of the biggest advocates, biggest references for EDS in the country. So training was at the heart, but it had to start with the team leaders. The team leaders had to let their staff have time for training. So to your point, it was getting the managers involved to stop going, just produce work, because that's what they were doing before. Just produce work, push it through, and not having the time to skill up. So I'm glad you raised that as an important point, because I've seen that. I've lived it to see the difference, what happens when you allow frontline managers to get behind the training. So now we'll do the wrap up.
Sounds great.
So next episode, we're going to be talking about is training still relevant when times are tough? And any loose ends we've had in these episodes as well. So you've been listening to Adam Specht talk about training, and people can find you where, Adam?
NoBoringTraining.com is home base. I post free daily tips on LinkedIn at Adam Specht on LinkedIn, and of course on YouTube at No Boring Training.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam. And if you'd like to find me, you can do so on LinkedIn under David Ketchen. Or I'm also on YouTube painting away as my other career as an artist. So until we meet again, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Feel free to leave a comment below as well. Thank you.